everyone, welcome to Pollyanna Storytime. Today we're going to be reading a very special book. Pollyanna actually did a production this past year based on this book. The book itself is called Miss Ladybird's Wildflowers, How a First Lady Changed America. A beautiful woman sitting in those beautiful flowers. Let's find out about her. Deep in the heart of Texas lives a woman who loves flowers. Wildflowers, she says, are the stuff of my heart. She loves the bright California poppies, the wild prairie roses in Iowa, and the thick bluebonnets of Texas, all of which grow along the highways of our great country. There was a time when our roadsides were ugly. They were cluttered with billboards, rusted old cars, and miles of trash. They might still be this way, if not for the woman we know as Lady Bird Johnson. She was born on December 22nd, 1912, in a large mansion known as the Brick House. Her mama and daddy, Minnie and TJ, named her Claudia Alta Taylor. But one day her nanny held her up and declared, "She's as purty as a ladybird." And from then on, folks called her Ladybird, the name of the colorful and lively beetle that grew in those parts. The Brick House was an enchanted but lonely place for a little girl. It stood by itself outside the village of Karnak, surrounded by the thick pine forest of East Texas. In the garden stood a tall magnolia tree whose enormous leaves and huge creamy blossoms bloomed each spring. Just beyond its grounds, Lake Caddo waited, with its winding bayous and ancient cypress trees. Peek around to get a good view. 3 months before Lady Bird's 6th birthday, tragedy struck. Minnie tripped at the top of the grand stairway and fell. She became seriously ill and died from blood poisoning. Lady Bird was heartbroken. Her mother had been so beautiful, so full of stories. How could she be gone? Winter settled in. The trees shed their leaves and the creatures curled up in their dens, and the flowers stayed closed up tight beneath the hard red clay. The brick house was lonelier than ever, but little Lady Bird was the loneliest of all. One day, Lady Bird heard a true story about her mama. A neighbor told Lady Bird about an afternoon when she saw Minnie, dressed in white, running down the drive barefoot to meet TJ. Minnie carried a bouquet of bluebonnets in her hand. When Lady Bird heard this story, the scene seemed so clear to her that when she closed her eyes, she could see her mama holding the bouquet of bluebonnets, her flowing white skirts brushing the tops of her bare feet. The vision soothed Lady Bird, and every time she saw a bluebonnet, it filled her with a sense of being loved. There she is listening to the story. And there's what she pictured. TJ did his best to care for his young daughter, but he was a very busy man. He was the richest landholder in Harrison County, and he owned a general store where he claimed to be a dealer in everything. On nights when he had to work late, TJ took Lady Bird with him. When she got sleepy, he put her to bed in a cot in the upstairs room next to the coffins. Lady Bird didn't realize what they were, and her father didn't tell her, but he knew that this was no way to raise a little girl. And that's when he sent for Lady Bird's Aunt Effie. Effie was full of songs and smiles. She taught Lady Bird how to pay attention to the wind in the pine trees and to the way birds sing. Aunt Effie planted daffodils in the yard at the brick house. When they first one bloomed each spring, Lady Bird held a ceremony for it. She would chant, "Oh, you are so beautiful. You are the most beautiful flower in the whole world. You shall be the princess." It was as if Aunt Effie's flowers became companions and helped take some of Lady Bird's loneliness away. Lady Bird attended a one-room schoolhouse in Karnak. She was a good student, and as she grew older, she often helped her father in his general store. But not all her hours were filled with studies and work. Whenever she could, she spent her afternoons and weekends in her beloved forest. In her diary, she later wrote, "I love to paddle in those dark bayous, where time itself seemed ringed around by silence and ancient cypress trees, rich in festoons of Spanish moss. Now and then an alligator would surface like an odd log. It was a place of dreams. As much as she loved the forest, though, Ladybird yearned to explore the world beyond its tall trees, beyond the walls, the brick house. There she is helping her daddy in the general store. And there, paddling in the bayou. In 1930, it was unusual for a woman to attend college, but when Ladybird was 18, she waved goodbye to TJ and Aunt Effie and moved to Austin, where she became a student at the University of Texas. Ladybird immediately fell in love with the rocky slopes, the brushy trees, and the wide-open sky of the hill country. And best of all, fields and fields of bluebonnets. So much was different, but the bluebonnets were the same. The city and its surrounding hills gave her a sense of freedom that she had never felt in the pine forests of home. In a letter to a friend, she wrote, "All the doors of the world suddenly were swung open to me." She's loaded up her car, waving goodbye. It was a heady time for a young woman from East Texas, and it became even more so the day she met a tall, handsome fellow named Lyndon Baines Johnson. Lyndon courted Ladybird with romantic letters that he sent almost every day. In one, he wrote, "This morning I'm ambitious, proud, energetic, and very madly in love with you." Ladybird was dazzled. On November 17, 1934, the two were married in a small ceremony in San Antonio. For their honeymoon, they traveled to Mexico, where Ladybird marveled at the exotic flowers and trees, unlike any she had seen before. She had never been happier. It wasn't long before Lyndon entered politics and won a seat in the United States Congress. One of Ladybird's roles as the wife of a congressman was to entertain people who came to the capital city. Often she found herself serving as a tour guide. It was a job she enjoyed, showing visitors the many museums and monuments that grace Washington, D.C. There's a big Capitol building. However, as she became familiar with the city, she noticed the dismal parks that were nothing more than concrete slabs, the dirty streets and shabby lawns, the unkempt and weedy shores of the filthy Potomac and Anacostia rivers. Remembering how beautiful flowers and trees had helped her thrive, she worried about the children growing up with only cement and asphalt beneath their feet. It sure doesn't look like a very fun place to go play in a park. To Ladybird, the act of planting flowers helped people become better caretakers. "It is important for a child to plant a seed," she told a friend, "to water it, nourish it, tend to it, watch it grow, and when he does, and when she does, they themselves will grow into great citizens." Have you ever planted anything? After her two daughters, Linda, and Lucy, were born, Ladybird made sure that her garden in Washington was full of blossoms, which she planted herself, just as her Aunt Effie had done so many years before at the brick house. But in her heart, she wanted flowers for every child, not just her own. In 1960, when John F. Kennedy was elected President of the United States, Lyndon was elected Vice President. 3 years later, on November 22, 1963, President Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, Texas. On one of the most tragic days in our country's history, Lyndon became president. All at once, under the worst circumstances imaginable, Ladybird became the First Lady of the United States of America. The entire country was thrown into mourning. One of Ladybird's first responsibilities in her new position was to help her country begin to heal. In her diary, she wrote, "Now the time has come to get the wheels of life rolling again." She knew from her own experience that beauty would help the country recover. Thanks to her boundless energy and with the urging of the President, the Highway Beautification Act was passed by Congress. Because of that law, the landscapes along the interstate highways of our great land were cleared of signs and rusted cars. The roadsides were blanketed in native wildflowers. In the capital itself, more cherry trees were planted, trees that fill the city with blossoms every spring. Best of all, 1 million daffodils were planted along the Potomac River, just like the ones that Lady Bird dubbed Princess when she was a little girl. Do you imagine if our streets still looked like that? Isn't that much prettier? When Lyndon's term of office ended in 1969, Lady Bird was happy to return to their home in the Texas Hill Country. The ranch had suffered from years of overgrazing by the long-horned cattle that roamed its pastures. So Lady Bird gave the old place a fresh start. She planted vast fields of Texas wildflowers, Indian blankets and Indian paintbrush, bluebells, purple horsemint, and especially bluebonnets. The ranch blossomed with color and vitality. She and Lyndon shared many happy moments driving along with their dog, Yuki, gazing at the wonder of the beautiful hillsides. But these moments were too quickly dashed. Only a few years after their return from Washington, in 1973, Lyndon's heart gave out. Lady Bird found herself mourning. Winter set in, and once again her house felt very empty. Although she found herself alone, Lady Bird drew comfort from her old love, wildflowers. One spring afternoon, she and a friend came upon a field that was blanketed with pink evening primroses. As they stood there, Lady Bird heard the unmistakable roar of a tractor. Sure enough, from the top of the hill, a farmer appeared, mowing down the beautiful flowers. Lady Bird couldn't stand it. She climbed over the barbed wire fence, ran toward the farmer, waving her hands. At first, he ignored her, but finally she stood right in front of the tractor, and he was forced to stop. Lady Bird implored him to stop mowing, but the farmer insisted that he had to plant his hay in order to earn his living. She was about to give up when ideas struck her. "I'll pay you for your wildflower seeds," she said. She offered him enough money to make up for his losses, and a deal was reached. She is waving that tractor down. This is one tough lady. When she turned 70, Lady Bird helped establish the National Wildflowers Center. There were scientists studying. Try that again. When she turned 70, Lady Bird helped establish the National Wildflower Research Center. There, scientists study the uses and effects of wildflowers. They also collect and preserve seeds of those flowers on the brink of extinction. Did you know that plants can go extinct? I never did. When asked why she helped found the center, Lady Bird told reporters that it was her way of paying rent for the space I have taken up in this highly interesting world. To stand on its lovely grounds is to experience a moment of natural beauty. That Wildflower Center is located right here in Austin. Maybe one day you can go there with your parents. Now, whenever you travel through the countryside and you see a field of wildflowers, be sure to wave to them as you drive by. Learn their names: the Lady Slippers, Black-Eyed Susans, Larkspurs, Wine Cups, Blazing Stars, Granny's Nightcaps. As you pass by, call out, "Thank you, Miss Lady Bird!" And remember that it hasn't always been this way. These flowers are ours to keep. They're ours to tend. They're the stuff of our hearts. The end. Thanks for joining us.